Hello everyone and welcome to the channel's 4K special. Now this is something I'd hoped to celebrate last year. In fact, I'd had some aspirations of hitting 5K and picking up a Steel Battalion controller to mark the occasion. However, life and health being what they are, that never happened. Truthfully, I just wasn't consistent and I found myself struggling with a massive case of imposter syndrome. You can blame my MechWarrior 2 video for that. Well, all of my MechWarrior videos really, since I made them with next to no knowledge of the series or Battletech itself. Like many starting YouTubers, I had no real awareness of the communities I was rubbing shoulders with. And well, the internet being what it is, I got a wide berth from some people. But I also found a lot of really supportive and excellent folks along the way. Which is great because I've made just about every single mistake one can make with running a channel. That is, short of falling for a scam and losing my account, knock on wood. Anyhow, in this video, I'll be answering some of the questions you've all sent in for me. It's sort of a way to interact with the community a little more. I know I haven't been great about streaming, I've always planned to, but it never seems to come together into a solid plan or schedule. But before I get to the questions, I want to address a common question about the future of the channel, mainly whether I'll be covering the Front Mission series. The short answer, yes. However, since these games are on the longer side, I'll be playing them alongside shorter games while making weekly videos. That being said, I'm starting with Front Mission 3, since it was officially released in North America and I already have some experience with it. I imagine a lot of others do too. Not everyone had the money or know-how to run emulators for fan-translated versions back when that game came out. That is, assuming it was even translated at the time, so that answers that. And yes, I'm planning on covering Super Robot Wars and Virtual On as well. I just won't have the fancy controller I wanted for the Sega Saturn original of Virtual On. But enough yapping, let's get to the questions you've sent in. Firstly, Bryce Johnston on Patreon asked, if you had the chance to create your own mecha series or video game, what would the world and setting be like? Would you go for a dystopian future, an intergalactic war, or maybe a more grounded near-future setting? How would the mecha themselves be designed? Would you go for sleek, advanced machines, or something more gritty and practical? And would the focus be more on the pilot's personal growth, the mechanics of the machines, or the larger political/war dynamics? Or would your mecha stand out in terms of both story and gameplay mechanics? Maritz2522 on YouTube also asked something similar. What's your dream mecha game? Like, what do you want the most from a mecha game, either story or gameplay wise? So I'm bundling these two questions together. I've often thought about gathering the skills to create my own mecha video game or even a comic. The biggest setback, as I see it, is that I can never seem to reach the artistic skill I want from something like that. Everything else, I know, is a process of learning and refinement, but art feels like an insurmountable barrier for me. Still, I've thought about this quite a bit. For me, there would have to be a big Deus Ex Machina vibe. Blame Ghost in the Shell for getting me hooked on preachy philosophical stuff from day one. It would definitely be set in a near future, grounded world. Once, I'd have said I preferred sleeker machines, but have come to appreciate the tension and expertise required to pilot something more archaic than, say, an AC unit. As much as I disliked Left Alive, I really liked the Wanzer designs there, and I'd love to explore something like that. In terms of story, I'd rather focus on character growth and uncovering something more than meets the eye. What exactly that is, I'm not really sure, but discovering it during a conflict, seeking out truth amidst the constant threat of enemy engagement sounds pretty fascinating to me. If I had the chance, I think the gameplay I'd envision would revolve around traversing and tactically planning engagements as the player worked their way towards their goal. It would be interesting to incorporate weather mechanics where the player has to deal with elements like rain, snow, or mud buildup on viewports and sensor units. I'd also like it for terrain density to factor into just about everything. That would probably require the player to leave their mech at times to maintain it while out of combat. I really think all of this would help the player form a deeper connection with their mech throughout the campaign. Retro PC Cupboard on Patreon asked, what are your methods for playing older titles that don't work on modern PCs, or how do you capture the output? While a lot of people turn to DOSBox for retro gaming, I'm not the biggest fan of using that program. I know it's useful, but for some reason it just never clicked with me. It's often the go-to for those who aren't aware of some of the issues it can cause. Personally, I prefer using programs like PCM and 86box paired with the older CDs to boot and install games. It does require some know-how and time, but it's by far the most reliable way to emulate an older PC setup and get those discs you have laid around working again, provided you have either a built-in or external CD drive. It's a great solution for running the Windows versions of games like MechWarrior 2 without suffering through the awful looking DOS versions. Unfortunately, I can't always get things working for games that require specific hardware, like the Matrox version of MechWarrior 2. That version tends to freeze when I walk, which is a shame. But I also rely on tools like DG Voodoo 2 and the Nglide driver, which seems to work well for me on modern systems. It's definitely a lot of fiddling to get everything just right, but when it does, it runs really smooth. WebFox100 asks, is there a mecha written media that you really enjoy? Example, manga, comic books, and novels. Over the last few years, I've discovered that there's a lot more to the mecha genre than I ever realized. The idea of mecha being present outside of video games had oddly escaped me, probably because that's where I first encountered it. When I tried diving into other forms, I found myself overwhelmed by the massive world of Battletech novels. While some of what I read was genuinely good, I always had trouble finding out just where to start. I'd read something, but it always felt like I was missing a piece. And honestly, I probably was, since many of the events are also detailed in source books. While I enjoy Battletech, I'm not sure its expansive lore is particularly beginner friendly. It requires a lot of effort to get into, and many in the Battletech community have grown up with these stories. Everyone has their own favorites, which only adds to the confusion, especially when it comes to figuring out where to begin. But anyhow, I'm all about Japanese manga. I've developed a bit of a habit for picking up the often odd manga versions of anime I like. I have the entire Nadesico, Razapon, and Gundam Origins manga collections, and honestly, most of these versions are often vastly different from the anime series they're based on. I'd love to dig deeper into this world, but sometimes it's hard to know where to start, just like with Battletech. Given how things are going in the world, I'm probably going to explore more of it online this year rather than sticking to my preference of physical versions. Jackal27 asks, what do you think the biggest prevailing problem with mech games is? Like the traps that the genre seems to fall into again and again. No matter what I say here, I'm probably not going to live down the answer, but here it is. I think the biggest problem with mech games right now is that they just haven't moved forward in decades. Whether it's a Japanese action series, a visual novel, or mechwarrior, they all follow the same paths they always have. At some point, it all stopped progressing and started circling around the same plots and themes over and over again. That's why I ended up playing so many older mech games. The reason there are so many older gems in the niche is because back then people were actually thinking outside the box and experimenting. These days it feels like the military or mercenary plots are just recycled and fail to hook anyone, or me at least. Fans of the mech genre have no choice but to look back at times where things were actually forward thinking. The Ryujin LP asks, what was the first mech game you ever played? Believe it or not, my first mech game was Mech Commander. I bought it on sale along with the PC port of Future Cop LAPD at a liquidation store. At the time, I didn't have my own computer at home. I wasn't the smartest kid, but I really wanted to play these games, so I stayed up nights staring at the boxes, hyping up the experience I'd have. In 4th grade, I took both games to school and tried installing them on the school computers. I absolutely fell in love with the opening to Mech Commander, but I wasn't great at the game. I only managed to play the first mission over and over. The school admin wouldn't let the game stay on the computers, so I kept reinstalling them and restarting. Because of that, I ended up buying MechWarrior 2 for the PS1 a year later. I was really disappointed though that I couldn't play as the Mad Cat or Timberwolf right away. When I first played Future Cop LAPD, it blew my mind. I never really saw 3D graphics before, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sadly, it would crash all the time because the school computers were terrible, but yeah, Mech Commander was definitely my first mech game. Alex Connolly asks, what's the one mecha/hardsuit franchise that you'd love to see make a return, and would the IP's revival remain in the hands of the original developer, if still existent, or is there another studio you prefer as a modern custodian? Without a doubt, I'd love to see Gun Griffin make a return. It's one of my favorites and a huge reason why I fell in love with the Sega Saturn. Without it, I probably wouldn't have been curious enough to keep this channel going. To this day, I never really played a series that stuck with me quite like that one. Even the last game, in my opinion, was great. Unfortunately, its creator passed away, and Gun Griffin was his baby along with Sylphie. Not only that, but the engine developed for it was an incredibly powerful tool that went on to power the Grandia series. After his passing, game arts more or less faded away and Gun Griffin was left untouched. I honestly don't think any modern studio would do it justice. The standardization of controls and game design today would likely reduce it to just another FPS style mech shooter, which, to be fair, the final entry already leaned towards. What it really needs is a faithful update, not a reinvention. But I'm not sure that kind of approach would fly with modern audiences. Axel Rosima7573 asks, so what do you like to see in a mechanical design? Okay, at one point I really liked sleek designs, machines that moved fast and hit hard, but as I branched out, I started to appreciate designs that felt more grounded. I watched a lot of OVAs and movies like Maddox 01 and Gunhead, and series like Gasaraki, which take a grittier, more realistic approach to mech design. Even older Gundam series can be surprisingly grounded and brutal. That said, I still enjoy the more whimsical side of sci-fi, like Orgus. The Pwnecast Live 2793 asks, what studio would you like to see take over the MechWarrior games? With Piranha Games on its way out the door fast, who would you like to see continue the IP? I'd like to see a fresh team take charge. The biggest issue with MechWarrior titles is that there are too many pens in the pot, which leads to a very let's focus on this subsection of the lore approach. This always results in open-ended stories that lack proper characters or satisfying conclusions. I'd rather see a smaller, more focused team handle the next game, one that tells an original story that feels personal and immediate, with a proper ending. Set it in the middle of a larger conflict so it remains original without disrupting the wider lore. We really need to stop brushing shoulders with sourcebook characters whose arcs conclude years after the story ends. Characters whose importance you wouldn't even understand without digging through extra material. Let all of that unfold outside the main narrative. Honestly though, I don't think many studios would want to take this approach since it doesn't lend itself to big flashy set-piece battles. Then again, imagine being on the front lines, getting hammered by enemy fire, and having to outmaneuver the situation in nothing but a locust. We need to see some actual humanization in these stories and situations, but it doesn't feel like any studios really understand that anymore. Buster Drag asks, mecha, specifically robots, are obviously your bread and butter genre, but do you enjoy games or media about other types of mechanical things? Jets, cars, tanks, spaceships, etc.? If so, which games would come to mind? Honestly, I love the idea of vast spaceships trudging through the ether. I really enjoyed the Homeworld series and had a lot of fun with it, but it feels like we won't see many games like that anymore. I've also played Stellaris and Endless Space, though I'll admit I got a little overwhelmed once Endless Space 2 started piling on DLC. That said, I'm always up for suggestions. HunBubby1410 asks, have you ever played mech board games like Battletech? I own both Battletech and the Clans expansion, but my biggest setbacks are that I don't have people to play with and that I can't really paint minis to save my life. For one, I have severe anxiety, even just recording my voice is a struggle. I have to constantly re-record myself, so making friends isn't always a good option for me. On top of that, I'm a lot busier than I might seem. That's also why I haven't gotten around to painting everything I own. And even when I try, I can't seem to get the camo patterns right, so I just end up with a bunch of mismatched units. I don't even know if that works in the game. I also can't afford to buy minis all the time, so I've got a pile of plastic I'm afraid to put a brush to. Try not to butcher this name, but Kei-Nova7985 asks, which Gundam IP would you want adapted into a video game, and which game studio would you want to make that adaptation happen? Believe it or not, this has already happened. It just wasn't in English. One of the best Gundam games is stuck in Japan, and it was developed by From Software. I'm talking about the Gundam Unicorn game on PS3, which is easily the best Gundam game I've personally played. I might be a little biased though, since Unicorn was one of the series I stayed up watching in the late hours of the night. Unfortunately, I first saw the cut-up Crunchyroll version, which wasn't nearly as good. The OVAs were much better, especially without all those massive recaps. But yeah, the game already exists, we just need it over here. Not that I think that'll ever happen. Loco0089 asks, have you ever thought about doing a series of YouTube videos talking about other games, TV shows, anime that you enjoy that are not related to mechs, expressing that they feel that the mech theme might be a bit limited? It's certainly limited, but I am finding some fun ways to branch out with it this year. I'm looking into making videos on figures and model kits, and I'm even considering importing some Japanese Gundam cards and whatnot to unbox on video. I've also been thinking about covering board games, specifically mech ones. Honestly, I do love mech stuff, and running this channel has pushed me beyond just being a rabid Armored Core fanboy. That said, I've also thought about diving into more RPGs and obscure games. I've wanted to branch out for a while, but the last time I did, I lost 40 subs overnight, which back when that happened was a big deal. That's why I keep sci-fi in the mix, so I can occasionally cover things beyond mechs. Unfortunately, whenever I do, those videos barely get watched, making it feel like wasted effort. But that's just the curse of YouTube. Things don't always work out the way you want them to. Joshua Clifton 2371 asks, have you ever touched Ring of Red or Front Mission? When I started this channel, I made a video on Ring of Red that I wasn't really happy with. Front Mission 3 was a big game for me as a kid, and I've been wanting to cover more games like it. Lately, I've really started to love RTS style RPGs like these, and I'm excited to dive deeper into them. I just need extra time to make those videos, and in the meantime, I'll be playing other games as well. Mark Sanders 5781 asks, can you please tell us what your favorite mecha universe is and a little bit about why? I feel like this question is asking someone's favorite band or movie. I could maybe give you a top 5, but that's tough for me. I haven't experienced them all. I haven't even watched the Patlabor series yet, just a few of the movies. Hell, I haven't even seen much of Voltum's either, and I desperately want to. So far, I'd say hesitantly that the Gundam universe is my favorite, strictly for the sheer variety. That, and I think the 80s and early 90s series have some of the best animations I've ever seen. War in the Pocket will always be my favorite when it comes to OVAs, and I completely fell in love with the 08th MS team and Stardust Memories. I won't lie, there are a lot of odd choices in Gundam, some so bad they're good and some just plain bad. And in some cases the manga is way better than the series that came out of it. But I've got a bunch of model kits and even wall decorations for a reason. Gundam is just something that I enjoy in so many forms that it kind of cancels out the bad in a lot of ways. As for a runner-up, Orgus and its follow-up, hands down. The ideas in that series are great, and I was surprised by how often situations had serious repercussions. I love the art too. I haven't even seen Macross yet though, but I'm also into universes like Fafnir, Gasaraki, Heroic Age, Majestic Prince, Knights of Magic, and so on. This channel was made with the intent of discovering more, so none of this is really definitive either. To wrap things up, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your continued support. Whether you've been here since the early days or just joined recently, it's been an incredible journey, and I wouldn't have made it this far without the community we built together. As I continue forward, I'll try my best to continue to explore more mecha content, tackle fresh challenges, and keep pushing the boundaries of what this channel can be. I know I've had my struggles, but you've all been a huge part of keeping me motivated to keep going, and of course my family has as well. Thanks again for sticking around, and here's to the next chapter. Let's keep making this thing grow.